Hey guys, it's Christian. This is going to be a update video for a video I did previously called What the Future of Disney Star Wars Needs to Do. And with that video, I went through all the upcoming future Disney Star Wars movies and TV shows and gave my thoughts on them. So for this video, I'm going to be playing that previous video and then chiming in occasionally with all the updates that we've gotten from those TV shows and movies, just because there's been a lot of updates with projects getting delayed or being put on hold or potentially being taken off the schedule entirely. So this video, I hope to keep you updated with everything that's going on in the future of Star Wars. But without further ado, let's jump in with Andor Season 2. I really enjoyed Season 1. Obviously, there was episodes that were kind of slow, some episodes that there wasn't really much happening in it. So I'm hoping that with Season 2, they kind of pick up the pace, and it looks like they will. I was reading that originally they had a plan for like 5 seasons, and then Tony Gilroy was saying it's impossible. It's like the production's like impossible to do just based on Season 1, like they go on location, they have all these amazing sets and production value and everything. So sustaining that for 4 more seasons was kind of impossible. So they're kind of cramming 4 seasons, or I guess 4 years worth of material into one, which I think is pretty cool. I know some people who like the slower pace of Season 1 will probably be a little jarring for them, but at least for us, me and like other hardcore Star Wars fans kind of want to see more, like pick up the pace a little bit more Star Wars lore tie-ins a little bit will be really cool. So I'm hoping that they do that with Season 2 and just get us to the events of Rogue One and kind of see Andor's arc of kind of being this guy who like runs away from the fight to finally join the fight, and then in Rogue One where he obviously gives his life for the rebellion to get the plans for the Death Star. Yeah, and something I'm really excited to see is Cassian Andor finally crossing paths with Mon Mothma, just because in the first season they're very separated and everything. A lot of characters were very separate, a lot of storylines going on. So it'd be kind of cool to see those characters finally meet up with each other, just because in Rogue One, obviously they were on Yavin 4, so it'd be cool to finally see them cross paths, see how they finally interact. It's kind of like Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen, finally meeting at the end of like Game of Thrones Season 6, where it's like finally we see the Song of Ice and Fire, come together and everything. So I'm hoping that we kind of see that with Cassian Andor and with Mon Mothma, just because they're such important characters, especially in Rogue One, and then obviously for Mon Mothma in Return of the Jedi. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that and kind of see like what their interaction's going to be, how they're going to deal with each other, how they're going to finally kind of like gel together and work together to make these plans to steal the plans for the Death Star and move forward with the rebellion, and how the rebellion's going to finally form and finally begin an alliance to take on the Empire. So I'm hoping we kind of get to see more of that. Yeah, I'm really excited for Season 2. Like I said before, I'm glad that they're not stretched along for another 4 seasons, but really kind of compress it all into like 1 season. And I don't mind the fact that it'll be another 12 episodes. I'm hoping that each episode will actually be packed with story. Hopefully we'll actually get like hour-long episodes. We'll kind of get like that breakneck speed and pace for these episodes, and that we'll finally have that epic conclusion that'll lead on to Rogue One, and then obviously we'll lead on to A New Hope. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. I'm really excited. Like I said before, I enjoyed Season 1. I just wish it was kind of more compressed, more eventful, and it looks like they'll be doing that with Season 2 moving forward. But yeah, I'm excited to see what happens of Cassian Andor, how we kind of see his arc throughout the season. So for Andor Season 2, Benjamin Bratt is actually going to be cast in an undisclosed role. Honestly, I have no idea who he could be. Maybe he'll be like a relative of Andor. Maybe he was one of the kids who escaped when his planet was being attacked, and this would kind of be like them reuniting. Maybe they'll be enemies and they slowly become friends in the end. Maybe by the end of this season, Benjamin Bratt's character gets sacrificed, and that kind of fully brings Andor into the fight with the rebellion. Or maybe he can be one of the Imperials. We honestly don't know at this point, but I think Benjamin Bratt's a great actor. I've seen him in a couple things. I haven't seen everything that he's been in, but from what I know, he can be like very dark and dramatic, but he can also have like a funny lighter side. But I think he's probably going to play more of like a darker, dramatic role. So hopefully we'll kind of get more confirmation with his role. But yeah, I'm excited that he's in the next season of Andor. They also talked about the format of the series, how there's going to be 12 episodes and there's going to be 4 3-episode arcs, and with each of the arcs is going to encapsulate 1 year of the Star Wars timeline. So that's going to be cool. Like I said previously, they were originally wanting to have 4 more seasons, and each season was going to take place over a year, but it looks like they're going to kind of cram all that in 1 season and have 3 episodes encapsulate 1 year. So I think that could be cool. Also for Andor, the last 3 episodes are supposed to take place over the last 3 days leading up to Rogue One. So that could be really cool. I was reading that Tony Gilroy really wants to ramp up the tension and really get the ball rolling of how this rebellion forms. And he says that the last couple minutes of the last episode is supposed to lead directly into Rogue One. So that's actually going to be really cool. So I feel like they're really going to compress the timeline now, because I think they originally had 12 episodes and have 4 chunks of 3 episodes that would cover 1 year. So yeah, it looks like they're really going to pick up the pace with this season, and yeah, I'm actually really excited. And just based on the footage that was played at Star Wars Celebration, it looks like they're really going to kind of hit the ground running with characters meeting up with each other and setting the stage for the events of Rogue One, and then eventually that will lead into A New Hope. At this past D23, they showed footage from the upcoming season of Andor, and and apparently it showed Ben Mendelsohn as Orson Krennic and Alan Tudyk as K2SO. So that's really exciting, and yeah, totally makes sense since, like I was saying before, the last couple episodes of Andor Season 2 are supposed to lead directly into Rogue One, and it's cool that we're going to be seeing the reintroduction of Orson Krennic and K2SO. So hopefully we're able to get more development for those characters, just because I know Rogue One is a very one-and-done story, obviously, and we don't really get too much time to spend with Krennic or with K2SO. So it'd be cool to see more of like their backstory and their history and their motivation of like why they're part of the Empire and, you know, why they're wanting to, you know, take down this upcoming rebellion, and the different relationships that they have with the certain characters, especially Orson Krennic's relationship with Galen Erso, the father Jyn Erso, and, you know, that whole fallout that happened, you know, because I know we got that brief flashback in Rogue One, but it'd be cool if we got more of the development with that. And I know there's like rumors that Matt Mikkelsen is supposed to be coming back as Galen Erso, so we'll see if that's confirmed or not. So I really enjoy the book by James Luceno called Catalyst, and it's really about the backstory of Galen Erso and Orson Krennic, and, you know, how they were kind of like friends, then became enemies, and then how, you know, one secretly developed plans for a weakness within the Death Star to eventually blow it up. So hopefully they tie more of that in, because I think that's a really good story and could really incorporate more backstory for those characters and for those moments in Rogue One and eventually in New Hope. And of course we got confirmation that K2SO is in this story. K2SO was definitely my favorite character in Rogue One, so to get more of him in this story would be really cool. One of the bummers about season 1 is that I thought K2SO was going to appear in that, but I know that since this story is supposed to take place over 5 years, that I guess would be kind of early if he popped up in season 1. So I know there's that episode where Andor gets arrested when he's on that beach planet, and then there's like those Imperial droids there, and I thought like that would be him, and that Andor would meet him in the prison, and that they would kind of work together to break out, and then, you know, form the friendship there. But I'm glad they're saving him for season 2, so we can get more development for that. You know, I'm not sure when he's going to pop up. I don't know if it's going to be towards the beginning of season 2 or, you know, the middle, but yeah, it'd be interesting to see how those two kind of like meet, and then, you know, how they finally kind of reprogram K2SO to go from working for the Empire to finally helping out with the upcoming rebellion. But yeah, I mean, overall, it looks really cool. You know, the footage just kind of described all the conflicts that are happening as the rebellion's starting to form, and there's a lot of battles and like a lot of like political intrigue and everything like that. Saw Gerrera pops up in there a little bit more, so it'd be cool to get more of his backstory as he's kind of like an insurgent, definitely not with the Empire, but not quite with the rebellion. So cool to see like his whole dynamic, you know, more like Luthen and Bix and Mon Mothma and all the other kind of rebel characters as well. So yeah, overall, I'm really excited for this season. I think as time's gone on, I've definitely kind of like processed the first season of Andor more, and I kind of appreciate it more for what it is, especially kind of all the hit or miss shows that we've gotten over the past couple of years. You know, Andor is definitely the gold standard of what a show should be, you know, Star Wars for adults. So I've definitely appreciated a lot more as the years have gone on. And yeah, I'm really excited for season 2 and excited for these updates and excited for these different characters that are going to be popping up as the show goes on. And yeah, I think it'd be really cool. And we actually just got a bunch of updates for Andor season 2. On February 24th, we got a brand new poster and a brand new trailer. And just starting off the poster, it looks really cool. Definitely has all the different characters involved and definitely kind of reflects the tone that was set in the trailer. Yeah, it definitely kind of reminds me of Rogue One with that whole poster with all the characters kind of like mixed and matched together, especially since this season is supposed to lead directly into Rogue One. I'm sure that Tony Gilroy and the other creators are trying to emulate the tone that was established in that movie. But yeah, it definitely just gets me excited for what's to come in this season and show how this rebellion is starting to form, as well as all the conflict that they're going to be having with the Empire. But yeah, just to jump into the trailer, it looks incredible. No, just right off the bat, it just shows all the different locations and the different missions that Andor and the rest of the rebels are going to be going on, which looks really, really cool. And I think what I'm most excited for is that the fact that we're just going to hit the ground running with the events that are going to lead us into Rogue One. And just as I was reporting before, these 12 episodes are supposed to take place over the 4 years leading up to Rogue One. So I'm sure there's definitely going to be a lot more action. It's going to be a lot more faster paced. There's going to be a lot more battles and a lot more drama and a lot more confrontations with the characters. So I'm definitely excited about that. The only kind of thing that I was kind of about was the music. That was kind of a weird choice. This kind of like rock song over Star Wars trailer, but no, this was the teaser. I'm pretty sure we're probably going to get an official trailer sometime soon with more of the kind of classical score. So we'll see what happens with that. I mean, as I watched the trailer a little bit more and more, I kind of got used to the music, but yeah, still kind of jarring the first time I listened to it. But yeah, it definitely introduces a lot more characters. We get more glimpses of Ben Mendelsohn as Orson Krennic, which looks really good. We also see a shot of Orson Krennic kind of looking through the windows of the Imperial Star Destroyer at the Death Star being constructed. So it's cool that we're seeing payoff from that storyline that we had in season 1 of when Andor was sent to prison. He was kind of like working on these little machine bits and we didn't really know what they were. And then we kind of cut to the ending of season 1 and we see that the parts were actually parts of the Death Star. So it's cool that we're starting to see that payoff in season 2. And, you know, obviously Rogue One will definitely be, be all about getting the plans for the destruction of the Death Star. So I'm glad that we're seeing those little hints here, and hopefully we'll see more of that in season 2. I feel like in Andor season 2, he's definitely going to be at the height of his arrogance, and once we get to Rogue One, he starts to kind of get pounded on by Tarkin and Vader and all these characters. But I think with this series, we're probably not going to see those characters. So he's definitely going to be at the height of his power, ruling over all these different Imperial officers and everything like that. So I think that'll be interesting. And then we got more glimpses of K2SO in there and the other kind of Imperial security droids. So I think that'll be really cool. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how Andor actually meets K2SO and how they kind of convert him from kind of an Imperial android into a Rebel droid. So we'll see how that goes. And yeah, we definitely get more Mon Mothma and more Luthen and more Bix and Saw Gerrera and a couple of the other characters that were introduced in season 1. So I'm looking forward to see more of their characters within the series and how they're kind of integrated into the different episodes, and more of the different villains like Cyril and Dedra. And it'll be interesting to see if, just based on the trailer, it definitely seems like they're in over their heads as far as like this rebellion growing. And I'm wondering if, especially Cyril, if he's going to be converted by at first working with the Imperials and then eventually working with the rebellion, and maybe he'll get sacrificed in the end or something. And I'm wondering if Dedra will kind of convert to the rebellion, or if Orson Krennic will send some kind of treachery with her and then she gets killed off or something. But yeah, who knows? But I know there's definitely going to be a lot of twists and turns in this, especially since it takes place over 4 years. Anything can happen. And we only get 12 episodes, so it's definitely going to be a very fast-paced show. And yeah, it definitely looks like it's going to be very eventful and very emotional, very dramatic, and very action-packed. So yeah, definitely looking forward to this, and I thought it was a great trailer. Also on March 5th, we got a special look at Andor Season 2. We got more behind the scenes from Tony Gilroy and the rest of the cast and crew talking about the production. And kind of like I was reporting earlier, it definitely looks like this is going to be an even bigger season than season 1, and there's going to be a lot more production value and a lot more like sets being built and hundreds of extras everywhere, and a lot of like practical effects that they're going to be using. Like obviously they're going to be using a lot of visual effects from ILM, but it looks like they're going to have a lot of stuff that was like in camera, just to enhance the authenticity and the production value of this epic production. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that. And yeah, I can definitely understand why Tony Gilroy wanted to kind of wrap everything up in one season, just because like I was saying earlier, you can definitely see like he put a lot of stuff on screen, and to sustain that for another 4 seasons was definitely impossible. So I'm glad that he's compressing it all in one season and just make it easier on himself, and just tell this grand story, wrap it up in 12 episodes, and just make it the best thing it can be. But yeah, overall looks like the cast and crew are definitely excited about this show. And going back to like the trailer with all the different like great critic reviews that they had for the first like couple seconds of like from all these different news outlets, you can definitely tell that the cast and crew are definitely very proud of what they worked on, and the critical acclaim that the show's been getting. This is kind of like the best thing since Mandalorian like years ago, and people will kind of regard this show as like kind of like the best thing that Star Wars has made since the original trilogy. And yeah, I definitely agree that Andor is definitely one of the best shows for Star Wars and for Disney Plus. And it's too bad that the numbers weren't exactly there, but I'm sure like with season 2, hopefully the viewership will go up, and the good word of mouth that season 1 got will transfer over to season 2, and that not only will it be like a critically acclaimed show again, but it also be like really good for viewership as well for Star Wars and for Disney Plus. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, overall I'm really excited for season 2. Hopefully they show another trailer with even more footage to get us more excited, and yeah, we'll see what happens on April 22nd. All right, now move on to Vision season 3. Back in November of 2024 at the Disney Content Showcase, a 3rd season of Visions was announced, which is set to release sometime in 2025, which I definitely wasn't expecting at all. And apparently the episodes for season 3 are supposed to be created in Japan. So it's cool that we're kind of getting more of the style of episodes that we got back in season 1, sort of the Japanese anime style of the Star Wars universe, which I'm really excited for because I really liked that season of Visions. I thought Vision season 2 was pretty good. It was still cool that they're kind of reaching out to different countries for the different animation styles, but I definitely appreciated more of like the Japanese anime style from the first season. So I'm glad they're getting that for Vision season 3. And there's been no confirmation on when it's supposed to release. It's just supposed to release sometime in 2025. I'm guessing maybe like sometime late summer or sometime in the fall, sometime after Andor season 2's been released, and then have some time in between. And then Disney Plus can have all of its focus on Vision season 3. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, overall I'm excited for Vision season 3. I'm glad there's gonna be more of the Japanese animation style from season 1. And yeah, hopefully we'll find out sometime soon when it's supposed to be released, and we'll see how it goes. All right, now we'll move on to Mandalorian and Grogu. And this is finally going to be the first movie to hit theaters since Rise of Skywalker in 2019, and it's going to be coming out in 2026. So I think that'll be really cool. But hopefully that'll kind of set the stage for Mandalorian and Grogu moving forward, just because season 3 ended with Mando and Grogu like on the porch, just like hanging out and everything. Grogu's like lifting up frogs and whatnot, and Mando's got his feet kicked up and everything. Overall, I wasn't the biggest fan of season 3 of Mandalorian. I thought there were some cool episodes in it, but like overall, it wrapped up Mando and Grogu's storyline. They were able to reunite the clans that were split from Bo-Katan and her faction, and the Armorers faction, reunite them, take on Moff Gideon and then, kill him off and his clones and everything. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that. I know now he's kind of like a gun for hire for the New Republic. So I think that'd be really cool to kind of see like what he does, the different jobs he takes as far as either being a bounty hunter or as far as, helping out, doing jobs for the New Republic. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, Mandalorian and Grogu. No idea what the movie's going to be about. Obviously it's going to be about Mandalorian and Grogu, but like as far as like the plot and everything like that, who's going to be the threat? Maybe there'll be more tie-ins to Thrawn. I know they're kind of setting the stage for the crossover film that Dave Filoni is going to be making later on. So hopefully we'll have Mando, eventually meet with like Ahsoka and the Skeleton Crew and, Boba Fett. Hopefully they'll kind of redeem Boba Fett's character because, you already know my thoughts of Book of Boba Fett. It wasn't like the best series on Disney Plus, but, I thought it was kind of I mean, the best episodes obviously were the ones with Mandalorian and Grogu, little Grogu. So yeah, I'm excited for Mandalorian and Grogu. I'm glad that we're finally getting confirmation that there's going to be a movie coming out. Kind of sucks that we have to wait till 2026, but again, Bob Iger is making it a mandate to not rush projects. So I'm glad that he's giving Jon Favreau the time he needs to, make this really, really good. And, yeah, Mandalorian's been kind of like the flagship show for Disney Plus, and, both those characters kind of became pop culture phenomenons. So it'd be really cool to finally see him, go on the big screen, maybe get people who are kind of just like, about the Mandalorian, finally on board, oh, I saw this trailer for Mandalorian and Grogu in the theater. Like, I really want to go back and watch the show, kind of like my wife. She hasn't watched Mandalorian just yet, but I know she loves the character of Grogu. Grogu has so much Grogu merchandise, so it'd be cool to finally get her into, the show and everything like that, maybe leading up to Mandalorian and Grogu, the movie coming out. So yeah, overall, I'm really excited about the movie. And, I know Disney just announced a whole slew of different movies that are going to be coming out soon, which I'll get to in a second. So yeah, I'm glad they're finally getting back into the theater. Not everything's just a Disney Plus show now. Now everything's getting back to the theaters like George Lucas' original intent was with that original trilogy and with the prequels and everything like that. Back in February of last year, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni were actually working on a 4th season of The Mandalorian, which I was super excited for and totally expected to happen after the movie. But then the writer's strike and the actor's strike happened, and Disney decided to put a hold on that project. And instead of doing another season, they decided to kind of put all their efforts in the Mandalorian Grogu movie instead. And they're hoping that if the Mandalorian Grogu movie actually does well, that they continue to just do sequel after sequel for Mandalorian and Grogu, and that can kind of open the door for more Star Wars movies. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. I think it's a really good idea. I feel like even if people don't really watch The Mandalorian, I don't think there's anyone who's not aware of Mandalorian and Grogu as characters. They're kind of everywhere now, as far as like merchandising and, like toys and posters and clothes and everything like that. Maybe this movie can kind of be like a reintroduction of those characters. Maybe it won't call back too much from the original 3 seasons of Mandalorian. It'll kind of be its own thing. And then, yeah, hopefully if it does well, they can just keep making sequels, and maybe they won't make more Disney Plus shows, because I know that was like their whole thing, is that Star Wars belongs on the big screen. It shouldn't just be on your TV screen. So if we can bring those characters into, movie theaters and then have that kickstart the whole process of getting more Star Wars movies out there, then, I think it's a good call. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'm really excited for it. And at this past D23 convention, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni also said that they've been filming for the past couple weeks prior to the actual convention. So I think that's really cool. They also dropped some footage kind of showing, a little sneak peek of the movie itself. Obviously it wasn't released to the public, but there's been, many articles out there with descriptions of what was in the footage. So what they did describe in it looks really cool. It's really showing more of the relationship between Mando and Grogu, and how Mando is really becoming like a father figure to Grogu, and that he's kind of like picking and choosing the certain jobs that he wants, because obviously he doesn't want his son to be in danger. And, just watching that as a dad, that's very, very relatable. You do anything to protect your children and everything like that. So I think that was really interesting dynamic for sure. Yeah, and apparently we're going to get a lot of cool cameos in this show. We're going to see Zeb from Rebels in the show, because I know we got that little cameo of him in Mando season 3. So it's kind of cool that we're going to actually be seeing him in the movie itself. And, I guess he's going to be kind of like a co-pilot of the Razor Crest. And I guess, the Razor Crest has finally been rebuilt, because I know it was destroyed in Mando season 2. So I'm sure like as the time between Mando season 3 and the movie, Mando's either rebuilt the ship or, purchased another ship, and they're going to go on adventures again. So it's really cool to see the Razor Crest again, because that was a really iconic ship from the first 2 seasons of Mando. And it was really sad when it got destroyed. So I'm glad that we're going to see it again. And we're going to be seeing more of the Anzelian species and more Babu Frick. And Babu Frick was the little engineer character from Rise of Skywalker. And then he also appeared in season 3 of Mandalorian. So really cool to see that. I didn't really care for Rise of Skywalker or for Mando season 3 for most of it, but seeing Babu Frick pop up in it, you're like, I am Babu Frick. It's really cool. So hopefully it's not just a little cameo. Hopefully he's more of like a supporting recurring role, and maybe he's like a little engineer on the ship with the rest of his species. So I think that'd be really, really fun. And apparently we see a lot more planets and characters and ships and everything like that. It looks like there's going to be something that was described as a snow planet, which I'm sure is probably going to be Hoth, because we got Hoth in Empire Strikes Back. We've never really seen it again. So really cool to see them go back to Hoth and have an adventure there. And apparently there's going to be like snow troopers and AT-AT walkers. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of callbacks to Empire Strikes Back, just because so many of those characters and settings and vehicles were so iconic from that movie. We really only saw it in that movie. I mean, I know we saw AT-ATs in like other movies and shows and stuff like that, but they're very much a standout in Empire Strikes Back. So if we can have like an Empire Strikes Back, adventure, or at least like an action sequence that takes place on Hoth with, snow troopers and, AT-AT walkers, I think that could be really cool. And we also got confirmation that Sigourney Weaver was cast in an undisclosed role. Again, no information about it. Hopefully she'll be playing like an ally for Mando. Maybe she'll be like an engineer or something. Maybe she'll work on the ship somehow, or maybe she might be another Mandalorian or something, or maybe she might be one of the Imperials, one of the enemies. There's obviously no confirmation on that. It's just been confirmed that she's been cast in the role, but obviously she's an amazing actress, and she can play comedy, drama, hero, villain. But I'm hoping that she played something kind of similar to like Ellen Ripley in the Alien movies, like a space trucker or something like that Mando meets along on the journey, and that she becomes like a partner in crime to him somehow and helps him out with repairs on the ship, like I was saying earlier. But yeah, I think that'd be really cool. She's a very iconic actress in person in general, so to have her in the Star Wars universe totally makes sense, and she's been in so many science fiction movies over the years, so to kind of draw on those strengths that she has as an actress would be really fun. So yeah, we'll see how it goes, and hopefully we'll get confirmation soon. I know it doesn't come out until May 22nd of 2026, so we have plenty of time for them to finish up filming and do post-production, and I'm sure as time goes on we'll get more sneak peeks and visual pictures and posters and behind the scenes stuff. So yeah, I'm really excited for this movie. Like I said earlier, I really hope that this is a gateway for more Star Wars movies. I know the Star Wars movies have been kind of announced way back in the day, back in 2020, have either been like canceled or delayed, or now there's not really any confirmation if they're going to be happening. So glad we have at least one movie that's actively in production and that we're actually getting footage for and hype for. So yeah, I think it's really cool. We'll get to a couple other movies later down the line that may or might not be happening, so we'll see how those go. But at least as far as Mandalorian and Grogu, I'm really excited for it, and I'm hoping we get an official trailer soon so we can like break down more of it, and yeah, we'll see how it goes. And we actually got a couple updates for the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. Back in mid-December, an actor named Johnny Coyne was revealed to be reprising his role as an Imperial warlord from Mandalorian Season 3. So I think that'll be interesting, just to have more of a tie-in to the Mandalorian series, and hopefully continue storylines that were set up from that previous season. Also, Jeremy Allen White was casted to voice the character of Rhoda the Hutt, and that character was first introduced in the 2008 animated movie Star Wars Clone Wars. So I think it could be pretty cool. I love Jeremy Allen White. He's one of my favorite actors. I love the show The Bear, and I love him in it. So it'd be really cool to have him in the Star Wars universe, even if it is just a voice. I'm pretty sure they'll probably kind of like augment his voice a little bit so it's not really recognizable and that it sounds more like a Hutt. And I'm not really sure like how big the role is going to be, but it's cool that we're going to be getting Hutts in the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. Like maybe they'll just be like a small cameo at the beginning. Rhoda's probably going to assign Mando on some kind of like bounty hunting mission, and then he goes, brings back, I don't know, some kind of criminal or whatever, and then gets the money from Rhoda or something like that. I don't know if Rhoda will be like a big part of this movie, but we'll see. But anyway, yeah, I'm really excited to have him in the Star Wars universe, whatever capacity it might be. And yeah, I think it'd add a lot of like gravitas to this movie, and yeah, I think it'd be really, really exciting. And then the last bit of news is that filming actually wrapped in December of last year, so that's really exciting. I know the movie is still a little ways away. We still have a little over a year until we finally get it, but totally makes sense. They wrap up the movie, and then I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of post-production, with editing and visual effects and sound and music and everything like that. So I'm sure the filmmakers probably want to get as much of a head start on the post-production process as soon as possible. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. And then yeah, hopefully within the next couple months we'll get more trailers and more like clips and more behind the scenes stuff, just so we can speculate about even more. I know there's that sneak peek that the audiences got at the D23 Expo, so hopefully they'll show that to the public so the rest of us can see it and we can do more breakdowns and speculations on what the story might be. But yeah, I'm glad for these casting announcements and the news that we got that the filming's been wrapped. And yeah, we'll see what happens as the months go on leading up to May of 2026.
All right, now we kind of get into the unspecified projects, the projects that have been announced, but we haven't really heard too much from it. We just kind of hear rumors and stuff about it, or the projects that a director or writer's been announced for it, but we have no idea what the title or the premise or the storyline is going to be. So this will be an interesting section. So I'll just kind of talk about my theories of like what I hope to see with these different movies and TV shows. And yeah, we'll see what happens with them in the future.
Ahsoka Season 2. I'm pretty excited about this one. I wasn't the hugest fan of Ahsoka Season season 1. I mean, I liked it, but I didn't love it. I think there was kind of much that was to be desired. But I mean, kind of ended on a cliffhanger with Thrawn and, the rest of his stormtroopers leaving the second galaxy and then going into like the main Star Wars galaxy with Ezra, and then Ezra meeting up with Hera and the rest of the rebellion. Then, of course, Ahsoka and Sabine being stranded on the planet, trying to figure out what's going on. And of course, Shin Hati and Baylan Skoll going their separate ways and then trying to find out about the Mortis gods and everything like that, what they're going to do moving forward up their strand on this planet. So there's definitely like some storylines that still need to be resolved. So I'm definitely excited to see that. It's going to be interesting what they do with Baylan Skoll, which, Ray Stevenson unfortunately passed away. So it'd be interesting to see what they do with that. I mean, he's a pretty important character in Ahsoka and then probably for the overall Star Wars galaxy. So I'm sure they're going to do something with him, probably just recast the role and then see how he goes on. Because I'm sure he had more of a part to play in the finale of season 1, because he kind of just had this bit role where he's kind of just like looking off in the distance. He was on top of the Mortis god statue and kind of looking out. So I'm sure Dave Filoni had more plans for him, but fortunately they won't be able to do it with Ray Stevenson, but I'm hoping that they recast the role for that. But yeah, other than that, I'm pretty excited for it. I know that there's still a lot of stuff that need to wrap up, with Thrawn. And I know Dave Filoni has his movie that he's going to be producing that's kind of like the wrap up of the whole Mandoverse, as they call it. So obviously Ahsoka needs to come back into the fold. So we'll see how it goes with that. I'm sure there'll probably be like a rescue mission or something from like Ezra and the gang trying to go back to the other universe, rescue Ahsoka and Sabine, or maybe Ahsoka will call another Purgle and they'll go into hyperspace back to the original galaxy and, have the big battle with Thrawn for the Dave Filoni crossover film that's going to be coming soon. So we'll see what happens with it. But yeah, I'm glad that we're getting a season 2. Hopefully they take in the criticisms that they got from season 1 and improve the show a little bit more, just make it a little more streamlined, not really contradict to what's been going on in the past with everything that happened with the whole Sabine reveal that she's force sensitive. Little tangent. I'm okay with the fact that she's force sensitive, but I think she just got powerful way too fast. The fact that she was like just barely starting to like move a cup and then suddenly she's able to force push Ezra from the platform like onto the ship as it's flying off, and just like, okay, come on, dude, you're kind of raying it up right now with how Rey just kind of became super powerful within Force Awakens and then as that sequel trilogy went on. But yeah, that's another story. But yeah, so I'm hoping that with season 2 they kind of explain a little bit more about why she's so powerful. And I know George Lucas was saying that everyone has a midichlorian count. They kind of hint at that in Bad Batch season 3. They're kind of hinting that everyone has midichlorians, but everyone has like different varying levels of midichlorian counts. So yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense. But yeah, still, it just kind of came out of nowhere, that she has all these midichlorians when in Rebels they never established that she was force sensitive, but now in Ahsoka she is. But anyway, too much of a tangent. But yeah, overall, yeah, excited for season 2 of Ahsoka. Hopefully it'll be a good transition to the Thrawn movie that Dave Filoni has planned later on. And yeah, hopefully they wrap up a lot of cool storylines and yeah, set up new storylines to be resolved in the future. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. Apparently it's supposed to be expected to be filming in 2025. So we'll see how it goes. I'm sure they'll probably film for about a year or so, do like a year post-production, and then maybe in like late 2026 or something, maybe like August 2026, we'll get it. But yeah, I mean, there's really the only news with that. I thought the first season was okay. There's still a lot to be desired. So hopefully with season 2, they'll kind of develop the story a little bit more, have a little bit more faster paced, have a little bit more eventful, and tie it more into the upcoming Thrawn movie that's coming down the line and kind of give more payoffs to the characters that we had set up in the first season. But I still have hope for it. And yeah, I think it can be good. We got a couple updates for Ahsoka season 2. Back in December, it was reported that filming is expected to start in April of this year in the United Kingdom. So hopefully that'll mean that there'll be just a couple months of filming, and then maybe they'll wrap sometime in August, and then maybe there'll be a year post-production, and maybe we'll get the second season sometime in August of 2026. So I'm not really sure like what the timeline is going to be as far as like the whole crossover with Mandalorian, Ahsoka, and Boba Fett and Skeleton Crew. But I'm guessing Mandalorian and Grogu movie is probably going to end with some kind of cliffhanger, and then maybe at the end of Ahsoka, maybe it'll end with those characters meeting up with Mando and Grogu, and then kind of like slowly but surely kind of form their team with Skeleton Crew and with Boba Fett, and that'll kind of like lead us into the whole Dave Filoni crossover film that they're supposed to be getting later online. But again, we'll see. There's been no confirmation on when they're supposed to be wrapping filming or when we're supposed to get season 2, so I guess we'll have to wait and find out. And then back in January of this year, Rory McCann was cast to replace Ray Stevenson for the role of Baylan Skoll, which I think could be really interesting. I mostly know him as playing the Hound in Game of Thrones. Definitely kind of different energies there. He wasn't really who I was expecting to be replacing Ray Stevenson for the role of Baylan Skoll, but I think he's still a good actor. Maybe just the Hound is like one side of his acting personality, and then maybe he actually has like a really good range that's kind of similar to Ray Stevenson as Baylan Skoll. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. I definitely think he has the physicality of Baylan Skoll, so we'll see if he has kind of like the acting chops to kind of match what Ray Stevenson did. But I'm glad they decided to recast the role instead of doing doing like a CGI recreation or just getting rid of the role in general, just because Baylan Skoll is such a huge character within season 1, and they literally left him on a cliffhanger, literally on the edge of a cliff at the end of season 1. So I'm glad that character will continue in season 2, and we'll see how Rory McCann does in the role. But overall, I'm still excited for Ahsoka season 2. I know there's like rumors that this will probably be the last season for Ahsoka, since Disney and Lucasfilm doesn't really want to risk doing multiple seasons and then having the viewership go down or like the critical acclaim go down. So they just want to announce one season, and then if it does well, do more. So I think it's kind of smart on their part. So we'll see how it goes. But again, that's just a rumor. Nothing's been confirmed. But yeah, we'll see what happens with season 2. There's going to be 3 upcoming Star Wars movies. There's going to be one by James Mangold, and it's going to be about the Dawn of the Jedi. There's going to be another one by Dave Filoni. It's going to be kind of like the wrap up of this kind of crossover between Mandalorian season 3, Ahsoka, and Skeleton Crew. Kind of like what I was theorizing before about there being a crossover event. So it looks like this movie is going to be that answer to that. And the third one is from Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy, and it's going to be set after the events of Rise of Skywalker, and it's going to be about the character of Rey rebuilding the Jedi Order. So yeah, I guess my theories beforehand were wrong. It looks like Daisy Ridley is going to come back for another Star Wars movie. Then we only have one update for the Rey movie. Back in January of this year, a screenwriter named George Nolfi was hired to write the screenplay. So we'll see how it goes. I know he's one of many screenwriters who've been trying to write this Rey movie, so we'll see if he stays on the project. I know there's still been a lot of rumors that Lucasfilm might just cancel this movie, but I'm sure Kathleen Kennedy is really just trying to advocate for this film and really try to get it to the finish line. So we'll see how it goes. And yet again, I still have no idea when it's going to be released, and now they're just starting to get the screenplay going. It's probably going to be like another couple years till we see it, so I don't really have high hopes that it'll be coming out anytime soon. And as far as I'm concerned, they can just keep delaying it, until eventually they decide to just cancel it. But again, I'm pretty sure this movie's going to come out sometime eventually, but yeah, we'll see what happens with it. But yeah, it's not really something I'm really excited for, and that a lot of people probably aren't excited for as well. So we'll see what happens with it. But yeah, it's really the only update with that movie. Kathleen Kennedy actually said that she wants to have a James Bond-esque release window of having 3 years in between movies. So I'm guessing after the 3 movies have been announced, once they start rolling out new movies, there'll be the 3-year gap in between. Kind of like what George Lucas was doing when he was releasing the original trilogy and the prequels. He had 3 years in between the movies. So I think that'll definitely be better for production. They won't have to feel as rushed about getting movies out every single year. So I think that was actually a really good decision. And then another announcement was that Kathleen Kennedy also confirmed that there's going to be an opening crawl back for the movies, which totally makes sense because at first it was just for the saga movies, and then after that all the Star Wars stories didn't have an opening crawl, which was kind of jarring to watch. So I'm glad that they have the opening crawl back in the movies. I never really feel like Star Wars again. Also for the Rey movie, it looks like Daisy Ridley's character of Rey is going to be serving as a Jedi Master rather than the main character. Kathleen Kennedy was saying that she's probably going to be like an Obi-Wan-esque type character, more like the mentor for a new generation of Jedi, which totally makes sense. So I know there's been a lot of controversy about Daisy Ridley coming back and bringing in more of like the sequel characters and having another film centered around her, especially since Rise of Skywalker was so panned by critics and fans alike. So I'm actually kind of glad that she's kind of in more of a supporting role rather than the main character, and maybe this will open the door for more story opportunities. Maybe this is kind of like a reboot of what they were trying to do with the sequel trilogy. Maybe they'll actually try to give this new main character time to develop and not have them be powerful just right off the bat. But if this does end up being a trilogy, hopefully we'll start off with this main character, kind of struggling with their powers, and then maybe by the end they have some kind of achievement, and then they set off in their hero's journey in like another sequel or a trilogy or something down the road. But we'll see what happens. Overall, I'm really excited that kind of like what I was complaining about earlier is that Lucasfilm doesn't really have a plan of like what they want to do with upcoming Star Wars movies. So I'm glad that they finally have a plan. They finally have announcements for what they're going to be doing. I'm glad that they're going to be setting them in different eras of the Star Wars universe, kind of like past, present, and future. So yeah, I'm really, really excited for it. There's not really too much we know about what the story is going to be, but just based on these filmmakers, I think they're going to be really good. James Mangold is, already in kind of like the Lucasfilm camp directing Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And then obviously Dave Filoni. I'll sing all the praises about Dave Filoni all the time. Mandalorian is his baby along with Jon Favreau, and then obviously Ahsoka is his baby because he co-created it with George Lucas. So seeing that kind of crossover event in this movie is going to be really, really cool. So I'm hoping that we get that soon. And this whole post Rise of Skywalker era movie could be really, really cool. Me and obviously a lot of other people weren't the biggest fans of Rise of Skywalker, but I think setting it sometime after those events, I think it could be really, really cool. I think Daisy Ridley is an amazing actor, and obviously she must have had some kind of resolution with Disney in order to come back. But yeah, overall, I'm excited for more Star Wars movies. I'm excited for these filmmakers, and now I have hope for the Star Wars universe for the movies moving forward, and just fingers crossed, hopefully they're good. But I think with these filmmakers in mind, I think it really can be. So yeah, we'll see how they go. And surprisingly, recently we actually got a couple updates for the Untitled James Mangold Star Wars movie. In April this past year, it was reported that a writer named Bo Willimon was actually confirmed to be co-writing it with James Mangold. And he actually wrote a couple episodes of Andor, so I think it'd be really cool. Like I was saying earlier about Andor, it's a show that I really appreciate. Very like adult Star Wars movie, and obviously the best Disney Star Wars show other than The Mandalorian. So yeah, to have him on board on this project, I think it'd be really, really fun. And yeah, it just gets me more excited for this story. I didn't say it earlier, but I know James Mangold was kind of describing this kind of like as like a biblical epic, something kind of like the Ten Commandments, the classic movie that came out way back in the day with Charlton Heston, which I think would be really cool. It's supposed to take place thousands of years before the events of the Phantom Menace, and it's supposed to be about, you know, the first Jedi. James Mangold is like an amazing filmmaker. I wasn't the biggest fan of Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, but other than that, he's directed some very, very good films. 3:10 to Yuma, and Ford vs. Ferrari, and Walk the Line, and Logan, of course, A Complete Unknown with Timothée Chalamet, the biopic about Bob Dylan. So I think that'd be really cool. You know, I think the fact that, kind of like I was saying earlier, that, you know, it doesn't really have to do with the Skywalkers, it's really more like its own thing, could be really cool. But yeah, I think he's a really talented filmmaker, and that he could really bring something really special to this movie and make something really great. And then also back in May of 2024, the producer of the film named Simon Emanuel actually kind of seemingly confirmed the title for the movie, and he says it might be called Jedi Prime, which I actually think is like a really cool title. It's like, you know, the first Jedi, the Prime Jedi, so I think that'd be really fun. I think it might be better than Dawn of the Jedi, kind of just make it more compressed and more to the point by calling it Jedi Prime. This hasn't been confirmed at all, so just kind of like rumors and speculations, but I think Jedi Prime can still be a pretty cool title. But yeah, overall, I'm still pretty excited about this movie. I still like James Mangold. You know, I know not all his movies are great, but for the most part, he's like a really talented filmmaker, and it seems like he has a really cool writing team and producing team to make something great. We still haven't really gotten a ton of updates with it, but hopefully this will be the next movie down the line after the Mandalorian and Grogu movie, and obviously the Thrawn movie by Dave Filoni. Still have no idea what's going on with the Rey movie, but there's been no confirmation with that, and there's kind of rumors that it's kind of been put on hold just because of everything going on with the backlash that the Acolyte's been getting, and kind of like just the overall backlash toward the sequel trilogy. You know, as time's gone on, you know, people are kind of forgetting it more and more and more, and kind of remembering the good times with the original trilogy, and now even like the prequels are having love, but like this sequel trilogy is kind of being panned. So I guess Disney is kind of not wanting to take the risk of like having the character of like a kind of very divisive sequel trilogy in a brand new movie that they want to put like hundreds of millions of dollars in, and, you know, kind of risk more fan backlash and a potential flop. So hopefully they'll put them on the shelf for now and develop that a little bit more, and put these other movies that are a little bit further in development, you know, like this James Mangold movie and Thrawn movie, and obviously Mandalorian and Grogu, and then potentially Lando and Rogue Squadron or whatever they want to do. Yeah, so we'll see. Overall, kind of a little tangent, but we'll just see what happens with the future of the films. But overall, back to James Mangold, I think this could be a really cool movie, and yeah, I'm really excited for it. And he's obviously a very good filmmaker, and I think he'll make something great. So yeah, we'll see how it goes, and hopefully we'll get more updates soon.
The Untitled Taika Waititi film, and I know this has been in development for several years, and, you know, Taika Waititi is obviously a very busy man with Marvel and, you know, with all those kind of independent projects and everything. So we'll see whenever he gets to it. There are like reports like this is going to come out like right after Rogue Squadron, but then, you know, Rogue Squadron got pushed to the side of the Disney movie slate, which is kind of a shame because they had this big announcement, like I said before, with like the Disney Investors Day. They had Patty Jenkins talking about her grandfather being like a fighter pilot, you know, how she wanted to create the best fighter pilot movie of like all time. And, you know, we see her in the cockpit of the X-Wing, and it just looked amazing. But then obviously that got shelved just because of the failure of Solo. They decided to just kind of put a pause on the Disney Star Wars films and then kind of focus more on the TV shows and everything like that. I guess there's like pros and cons. Pros is that, you know, they kind of learn from their mistakes, and, you know, they're kind of really trying to focus on having like a writer's room and actually having a plan, you know, plan things out in advance and everything. So they just kind of had to learn the hard way, which is kind of unfortunate. And the cons is that all these different projects and movies and stuff that, you know, we were really excited about have been canned. So we'll see what happens with the future of all these different movies and shows. But anyway, back to Taika Waititi. I know he was being interviewed, him and Kathleen Kennedy, and now they kind of want to move away from the Skywalker saga for obvious reasons. They kind of want to introduce like new characters, new planets, new storylines, which I think is like really good, because I think the problem with a lot of these like new Star Wars movies and shows that kind of tie into all these legacy characters is that we as fans obviously have a connection to these characters, you know, and when they're not done right, we get upset. You know, Obi-Wan, for example, where we had this potential of like having this amazing, incredible Obi-Wan focused show with Darth Vader / Anakin as this main antagonist, but then he was like, no, let's have it be about Reva and everything, you know, have our little Disney agenda and kind of hijack the show, which it's like a Trojan horse where you're like, the outside it's going to be about Obi-Wan, but on the inside it's really about Reva. And instead of just like, let's just have our own, you know, Reva show, let's just have her hijack Obi-Wan show, and and then have it kind of be disguised as Obi-Wan show, but really it's about Reva. Or like Book of Boba Fett, where you kind of hype him up as this, amazing character that we had in the episode of Mando season 2, where he's like this incredible gunslinging gangster taking out Bib Fortuna and sitting on the throne. But he's got to be, redeemed in a way. He can't be too dark. He's got to be this honorable leader, and he's got to get back to his Bacta tank and all this stuff. Where it's just like, oh, come on, you hyped him up to be this amazing character in that Mando season 2 episode, and then you just kind of make him a wimp in a way. So yeah, I think moving forward, Disney really just needs to take on new characters. Either take on new characters or have Dave Filoni shepherd all these legacy characters, just because I feel like out of all the creators at Disney, with the exception of Jon Favreau, he's the one who really cares about the vision that George Lucas set out with Star Wars. He really wants to shepherd these characters in this storyline and, have it be consistent with what George set out with those first 6 movies. And, he was obviously an apprentice to George Lucas when he was working at Lucasfilm and, working on the Clone Wars and developing that whole storyline. He helped co-create Ahsoka with George Lucas. But as far as these other shows, like Obi-Wan and Book of Boba Fett, they've just been kind of hit or miss. Andor is different just because he's not really a legacy character, so they can kind of do what they want with him because we kind of know where he ends up. Because yeah, as far as these characters that we know and love, Disney just hasn't really been treating them with respect. And you can kind of see with like Last Jedi with Mark Hamill, you can see all those videos of like how Mark Hamill warned us about The Last Jedi, and like how obviously he's having like this terrible time with like how Rian Johnson treated Luke Skywalker in those movies, and the proof is in the pudding of how the fans reacted, and became the most divisive Star Wars movie of all time. Anyway, as far as like Taika Waititi, I think moving away from the Skywalker saga and telling new stories is like a good call. I'm a big Taika Waititi fan. I wasn't the biggest fan of Thor: Love and Thunder. I think just because he kind of stayed in the Marvel sandbox a little bit too long. He did great with Thor Ragnarok. That's like my favorite Thor movie. But as far as staying within one franchise, I think was kind of like a detriment to him. So maybe he kind of felt that pressure to, I gotta give fans what they love from Thor Ragnarok and just double down, just do the same thing with Thor: Love and Thunder instead of like moving the story forward. But yeah, I think he's an incredible filmmaker. He's like a 2-time Academy Award nominee, and an Academy Award winner for Jojo Rabbit. So obviously he can make a great movie. And then he directed the season finale of Mandalorian season 1, which was incredible. So if you just kind of give him the freedom to do his version of like a Star Wars movie that's not kind of shackled by, you gotta have all these legacy characters, you gotta involve the Skywalkers, just have an incredible, Taika Waititi Star Wars film, I think it'd be good. So we'll see what happens with that. I know it's still a little ways away because he's busy with all of his other projects. So we'll see what happens with that. Once we get production stills and a first teaser and maybe like his own panel where he's actually talking about it and we have casting announcements, then I'll get a little bit more excited. But for now, it's kind of more theoretical. So we'll see what happens with that.
So for the Untitled Taika Waititi project, Taika Waititi is planning on putting himself in the movie, which totally makes sense because he's literally in every one of his movies, like What We Do in the Shadows, Hunt for the Little People, he has a small role, Thor Ragnarok, he plays Korg, Jojo Rabbit, he plays Hitler. So yeah, I think it could be, pretty cool having him in the Star Wars galaxy. Like maybe he'll do like an IG-11 movie or something, since that was his character in Mandalorian. So we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, there's really no information with it. It's probably going to be a while until we actually get the movie. So we'll see. It's been confirmed that it's still in development, despite all the rumors that it's been canceled and whatnot. I know Taika Waititi made a joke because there was like a awards ceremony for Sean Levy for like some producers award ceremony, and Taika Waititi was a speaker for that, and he joked like, oh, be sure to get your scripts in, because Disney's going to come down hard on you, especially, when it comes to Star Wars and everything like that, since Sean Levy's also directing a Star Wars film as well. So yeah, I'm glad that, it's still in development. There was also news that because of like the writer strikes and the actor strikes, he had to stop production on it, stop writing it. So I'm glad that now that those strikes are over, he can resume writing it again. And, there's no confirmation on when we're going to get it. So hopefully we'll make it in like 2027, 2028 or something. But yeah, we'll see what happens with it. Like I said before, I'm a big fan of Taika Waititi. I haven't seen Next Goal Wins just yet, but it's on my list on Hulu. So I'm hoping to watch that real quick just to support him. But yeah, I'm glad he's still working on it. And hopefully we'll get it soon. All right, now we move on to Lando, another show, like I said before, we don't know any information on really. We just got that one announcement at the Disney Investors Day years ago of how this show was going to be made and how Justin Simien, who directed Dear White People, is going to be executive producer and head writer on it. But then after that, we've heard nothing from it. So we'll see what happens with that. I'm really hoping that it kind of explores more of who Lando was before we see him in Empire Strikes Back, even before we see him in Solo, kind of we get more background of like who he is, maybe kind of give more context to L3, even though she wasn't really my favorite character, but kind of explain more of that relationship, kind of explain why he became a gambler and all that. I think that could be cool. But other than that, we don't really have any information about that. We just had the announcement and then the title, obviously Lando. Hopefully it'll be good, and hopefully we'll get more information on it as the years goes on, and we'll actually get a release date and some
footage and some production photos and stuff. So we'll see what happens with that.
So it looks like it's not going to be a TV series. Now it's going to be a movie, which I think would be really cool. And Justin Simeon's actually not going to be involved with it anymore. Now Donald Glover and his brother are going to be taking over production, writing, directing, and having Donald Glover star in it. So I think that would be really cool. Again, no confirmation on like when it's going to be released just yet, but I'm glad that that's in development. I'm glad that Donald Glover is actually involved with it because, he's obviously a really good writer and director, especially with Atlanta. Again, another show I haven't seen, but hopefully I'll see soon, along with his brother running that show. So it's really cool seeing those two collaborate, and then hopefully, they'll make a really cool Lando film, which would be really, really fun. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. Like, again, I wasn't the biggest fan of Solo, but I really love Donald Glover's portrayal of Lando in that movie. So I'm hoping that we get more of that in the Lando show. I know they said something about like they wanted to kind of be like Catch Me If You Can in the Star Wars universe, the film directed by Steven Spielberg. So I think that'd be really, really cool. But yeah, I'm excited to see it. And again, hopefully we'll get more news on it in the future and we'll see how it goes. We got confirmation that Patty Jenkins is going to be coming back to write and direct Rogue Squadron. So I think that'd be really cool. I know this project's had a lot of ups and downs and a lot of like drama behind the scenes going on, but I'm glad that her, Disney and Lucasfilm were able to resolve everything, and then we can finally get Rogue Squadron back in development. Again, no news on when it's going to be coming out, but hopefully within the next couple years, because it seemed like Patty Jenkins already had like the script written, ready to go, so maybe she's just going to go back and do some tweaks and everything. And hopefully that'll be the next film after Mandalorian and Grogu, just because the idea for it is just so incredible. It's going to be kind of like Top Gun in space, because Top Gun Maverick's one of my favorite movies of all time. So to see that in the Star Wars universe would be really cool, and a way for Patty Jenkins to honor her father, who was a fighter pilot. So that'd be really cool. And her just being a Star Wars fan, just bring those two loves together, be really fun. It's unfortunate that, she wasn't able to do Wonder Woman 3, the whole changeover of leadership at Warner Brothers in DC over to Peter Safran and James Gunn, which, I'm still excited about, the change and everything like that with their whole slate of DC films. But yeah, it's unfortunate that Wonder Woman 3 got canceled, because I love the first Wonder Woman movie. Didn't really care for Wonder Woman 1984, but I'm sure Patty Jenkins and Gal Gadot would probably have like an amazing idea for Wonder Woman 3. Because I know that they were trying to do like something with the Amazons and get Linda Carter in there, have them like team up and whatnot. But anyway, back to Rogue Squadron. I think it's going to be really cool, and I'm glad that it's back on the slate because, again, like I was really excited for it. And then when it got canceled, got pushed off the side of the incoming project for Star Wars, like me and a lot of other Star Wars fans were very disappointed. So again, I'm glad that's back in development, and hopefully we'll get soon, like I said before, like after Mandalorian and Grogu, and yeah, get a really good, amazing fighter pilot movie, Top Gun in space. So we'll see how it goes.
All right, and then we move on to A Droid Story, and kind of like what I was saying with Lando, this is another title that was announced at the Disney Investors Day, and then we've heard nothing ever since then. But apparently it's supposed to be the epic journey of C-3PO and R2-D2 leading this new character into the whole Star Wars story. I think it's just supposed to be a film, which totally makes sense. It's supposed to be kind of like the interconnectivity of animation and visual effects. So I think that would be cool to see like an animated version of R2-D2 and C-3PO, since we kind of got that in Clone Wars, the 2D versions of them in like the Clone Wars micro series. So it'd be cool to see like more like a CG animated version of those characters, kind of like in a full feature. Because, we got the Droid show, back in the 80s, the 2D version, which was a very cheesy show, but it was the 80s, what can they do? So maybe something that's kind of like in the vein of that. I have no idea who this new character is going to be. Are they going to be human? Are they going to be aliens? Are they going to be a droid? We don't know. It's just going to be a new character, maybe a new like Force user character, a new Jedi would be cool. Maybe someone who joins the rebellion later on. That's another thing. We don't know what the timeline is going to be for this movie, where it takes place. So we really have no context, or it could just be its own separate thing. So we'll see. Maybe it'll be like a post-Secret Trilogy show or something. So now we can finally introduce a new character. Or yeah, maybe it can be something in between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope, just because, there's that 19-year gap where we don't really know what the droids were doing at that time. I'm sure there's like plenty of books and comics and video games that explain it, but to have something that's actually canon would be really cool. And then maybe they'll pop up in Ahsoka Season 2. Like I said, Lando, we have no idea anything about this story. We just know the title and then the log line for it. So yeah, we'll see. All right, now we'll move on to the Rian Johnson trilogy. When he was making Last Jedi, Kathleen Kennedy was so happy with Rian Johnson, with the way that things were going with Last Jedi, that she just gave him a whole trilogy before Last Jedi even came out. And then, like I said before, it became the most divisive Star Wars film of all time. After all the reviews went down, they put that to the side. But I guess technically it's still in development. But now Rian Johnson's, busy with the Knives Out trilogy. The report said that he's going to finish off the Knives Out series with like another film at least, and then start work on at least part one of the trilogy, just because I don't think he's going to do a whole trilogy. And speaking of which, Kathleen Kennedy has kind of announced that they're not going to announce trilogies way off in advance. Try to focus on just making one good movie, and if it does well, then announce maybe like a second or third one. But anyway, yeah, with Rian, he's going to be writing and directing apparently part 1 after he's done with the Knives Out trilogy, which yeah, I think it's like a good idea. I mean, like I love Knives Out. The first one is like one of my favorite movies of all time. So even if he doesn't do Star Wars ever again, which, you know, I won't be sad about. If he just wants to stay in his Knives Out universe, like I'd be totally fine with that. And maybe if he wants to do like the story and executive produce his whole Star Wars trilogy, or at least the first part of the series, then I'm totally fine with that. But yeah, we'll see. Like I keep saying before, we have no idea like what he's wanting to do, but kind of based on what Kathleen Kennedy said before, she wants to kind of be outside the Skywalker saga, which I think is a good idea. It's kind of like what I was saying before with my problems with Last Jedi, like Ryan's treatment of Luke Skywalker and Mark Hamill. I think it's good if he kind of has a Star Wars movie that's away from the Skywalker saga and kind of makes his own story, because he can obviously make a great movie. I haven't seen Brothers Bloom, but I've seen Brick and I've seen Looper and obviously Knives Out, and you know, he can make like a great sci-fi movie. Like Looper I thought was pretty good. The ending was like I still was kind of iffy on, but I think like the movie itself was like really, really good. So yeah, I think if he can make just like a really just good Star Wars self-contained movie, and if it leads into a trilogy, if it's good, then I'll be excited for it. But for now, we'll see what happens after he's done with his Knives Out series. The Sean Levy film, which I'm actually really excited for. Obviously what I keep saying before, we have no idea what he's going to be doing for the story or what era he's going to set it in, but I mean, I think it'd be cool. Obviously his filmography is great. Just the past couple projects he's done, Deadpool 3, he's going to be doing the final episodes of Stranger Things, he's probably going to be doing like a Free Guy sequel, Adam Project, he produced like Arrival. I think this is going to just be like a really just fun movie with some, you know, dark elements, maybe some like twisted humor, a lot of action. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what he does with it. Obviously he's a big Star Wars fan and just an incredible filmmaker. I'm just thinking about episode 4 of Stranger Things, where, you know, you laugh at one moment, then you cry another moment, then you're kind of in awe in another moment. So yeah, I'm really excited for it. Just based on his filmography and everything, I feel like if he's leaning more towards Ryan Reynolds films that he does, he's probably gonna have like a protagonist who's kind of goofy, kind of charming, kind of like a Han Solo type, and you know, he kind of gets wrapped up into this adventure that's bigger than him, and he doesn't really know how to handle it. Maybe it'll kind of be like Chris Pratt in Guardians of the Galaxy or something, you know, something more for like an older audience, or something like that's fun, action-packed, doesn't take itself too seriously. It could have its like dark, scary moments, but I think whatever he has planned, I'm excited for. He's like an amazing filmmaker and everything he's done. He's like the it guy in Hollywood right now as far as like the movies and TV shows that he's kind of producing and directing and everything. So why not add a Star Wars project onto your list? So yeah, we'll see how it goes. Again, this is all kind of speculation. I have no idea what's going to happen with it. It's definitely going to be a while because he still has to finish up Stranger Things 5. So it's probably going to be a while till we see it. But whenever he does set to go in production for, you know, I'm going to be here for it. Maybe there'll be like a Ryan Reynolds cameo or something. That'll be fun seeing him in Star Wars since he's already in Deadpool with Marvel. So yeah, we'll see how it goes, and I'm excited for it.
And we actually got a bunch of updates for the Sean Levy film. Back in July of last year, it was reported that Jonathan Tropper will be writing the screenplay, and Jonathan Tropper actually worked with Sean Levy on the Adam Project. So it's cool that they already have a relationship there, and they can kind of have a shorthand as they kind of develop this story. And then back in January of this year, Ryan Gosling entered talks to star in the film. And it was also reported that his interest in the project actually accelerated this project forward and have it be the next Star Wars movie to enter production after The Mandalorian and Grogu. So I think that's really interesting. I mean, first off, I really like Ryan Gosling as an actor. You know, I haven't seen any of his like really earlier stuff, but ever since the movie like Drive onward, I loved everything he's been in. Blade Runner 2049, La La Land, Crazy Stupid Love, The Ides of March. I even thought he was like the best part of Barbie. So yeah, I really think he's a really fantastic actor, and the fact that he's in a Star Wars movie, I think is really interesting. Definitely wasn't really expecting to see him in a Star Wars movie, but kind of going back to my theories of what I thought the main character would be for the Sean Levy film, I think Ryan Gosling can fit that mold. He's definitely, you know, kind of like goofy, he's charming, he's definitely really good with action, so I think he could be perfect to be in a Star Wars movie, you know. I just hope he doesn't really like distract from the movie. I just hope that he feels like perfectly integrated within the Star Wars universe, and that whatever Sean Levy has in mind for his character in the story can be really compelling and can be really something that, you know, is worthy of the Star Wars name. So we'll see how it goes. And then actually this month, Kathleen Kennedy actually confirmed that this movie will be the next one after Mandalorian and Grogu, and she also revealed that the events of this film will be taking place 5 or 6 years after Rise of Skywalker. So I think that could be really interesting. Still have no idea like what the story's going to be. Don't know if Ryan Gosling's going to be playing a Jedi, or if he's going to be someone from the Resistance who's trying to rebuild the New Republic, or if he's going to be some kind of scoundrel character who's trying to just make his way in the universe, you know, that's trying to repair itself. You know, maybe he's like a bounty hunter, maybe he's like a Mandalorian himself, you know, going from place to place and, you know, shooting people up, getting his bounty. Maybe he's a surviving First Order officer, you know, who's trying to rebuild the First Order. You know, who knows what it could be. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it's kind of separated from the whole kind of Rey storyline concept, you know, where she's trying to rebuild the Jedi Order. Hopefully it's it's just a completely different storyline that takes place within the whole post Rise of Skywalker era. It just tells its own story, so we'll see how it goes. And since it's supposed to be the next movie that was supposed to be released after Mandalorian and Grogu, I'm sure we're probably going to get it maybe 2027, 2028. I know Kathleen Kennedy was saying that she wants to have like 3 years in between projects, but not really sure if that's going to happen, especially since the Star Wars projects are kind of few and far between. So I'm sure we're probably going to get sooner rather than later. So yeah, maybe 2027, 2028. Yeah, hopefully as time goes on, we'll get more details about the story, and then we'll get more like behind the scenes stuff and, you know, more like trailers and posters and stuff like that, you know, just for more speculation. But I'm sure we'll probably get more of that closer to when Mandalorian and Grogu comes out. So a while till we get that. But yeah, overall, I'm really excited for this movie. I really like Sean Levy. I really like Ryan Gosling, and I think the two of them could, you know, make something great. So we'll see what happens with it. Right now, move on to the Simon Kinberg trilogy. I know this information's been out actually for a while, and actually came out as I was releasing my previous video for what future Disney Star Wars needs to do. So I feel like I'm really late reporting this, but I just thought I should definitely mention it here. Back in November of 2024, Simon Kinberg was reported to be writing and producing the next Star Wars trilogy, with Kathleen Kennedy producing. And then actually this month, Kathleen Kennedy confirmed that the trilogy was in development and revealed that Lucasfilm was expecting drafts to be completed in June of this year. And Kathleen Kennedy also revealed that Simon Kinberg's trilogy was the new saga. So I guess that's confirmation right there. I'm really hoping that we just get a whole new batch of characters and a whole new storyline, and we don't really have to be shackled by the Skywalker saga. We can just tell a brand new story, you know, move the story forward. You know, maybe they'll actually take the treatments that George Lucas had, you know, way back in the day for his version of 7, 8, 9 and kind of restructure them to make them work for this new saga. You know, hopefully we'll have like a main villain, you know, who's kind of like rules like the underworld of Star Wars. And, you know, we're also having like the New Republic form. You know, we have a new Chancellor, we have a new, you know, Jedi Order that's being formed, and, you know, all heck breaks loose, and, you know, we get a whole new saga, a whole new conflict, or maybe it just takes place in a completely different galaxy, completely different conflict, you know, who knows. But, you know, I'm sure there's probably going to be some tie-in to the Skywalker saga. You can't really have Star Wars without those characters that we know and love, so even if they are just little brief cameos. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Maybe like this first part will be kind of ties more or less into the Skywalker saga, and then, you know, 11 and 12, you know, will tell a completely different story. So we'll see. You know, they're supposed to get the drafts completed by June of this year, so maybe, you know, by that point, you know, they'll feel solid on the story, and then they'll kind of roll into pre-production, and then we'll get like some casting announcements and story announcements and details like that. So we'll see how it goes. You know, maybe it'll be the next, you know, movies right after, you know, the Sean Levy films come out, so maybe we'll get them, you know, 2028, 2029, 2030, who knows. But again, I'm sure Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm are trying to get these movies out sooner than later, you know, just because of all the kind of like hit or miss movies that have been announced and been canceled, or like still in development, or whatever it might be. So I'm sure like once they get like a solid idea, they're just gonna go and run with it. So we'll see when we get it. But yeah, you know, I'm pretty excited for the Simon Kinberg trilogy. You know, I think he's a really good filmmaker. You know, he did a lot of work with, you know, Star Wars Rebels, you know, way back in the day. So, you know, I'm sure he's gonna treat this with a lot of care and a lot of respect. So yeah, we'll see what happens with it. But yeah, I guess it's just kind of like a wait and see at this moment. So yeah, I guess I'll sort of wrap up my thoughts and just say that, yeah, I'm not really quite sure what the future of Star Wars has in mind. You know, I know a couple years ago I was saying that the future looks really bright, and that Bob Iger's back as CEO, and, you know, Kathleen Kennedy might be retiring, and Dave Filoni slowly but surely gaining power within Lucasfilm. But yeah, now it just doesn't really seem as hopeful. You know, I think they still have a lot of good, you know, movies and TV shows that are coming out, you know, like Andor season 2 I'm really excited for, Mandalorian and Grogu I'm really excited for. I don't think Star Wars is completely dead yet. I know a lot of people have kind of given up on Star Wars for good reason. You know, we just got The Acolyte, and, you know, that was kind of a train wreck in a way, and, you know, got canceled, and, you know, just caused more divisiveness between, you know, the fans and the studio and whatnot. So yeah, we'll see. But you know, the numbers weren't there. Disney's not going to pour more and more money into a show or a project that's not going to give them a good return on their investment. So that's why it was canceled. But yeah, and obviously it just wasn't a good show. I wanted it to be good. You know, if they did do a season 2, you know, I was hopeful that, you know, they get a good writers team on board and, you know, actually make good mystery and, you know, stuff like that. But yeah, got canceled, so sorry. Yeah, so I feel like, you know, kind of like a decline with Star Wars, but I feel like hopefully kind of just keep the ball rolling with, you know, like Andor and Mando and Grogu and second season of Ahsoka, and then, you know, Rogue Squadron and James Mangold's film, and obviously Dave Filoni's film. So yeah, I feel like we're just kind of in a state of uncertainty when it comes to Star Wars. I think if we have like 3 or 4 just good projects in a row, you know, I feel like people's hope will be restored in Disney and Star Wars and Lucasfilm. But yeah, we'll see. I'm still kind of like cautiously optimistic optimistic about Star Wars. I'm not like over the moon excited about everything that's coming out, but I'm not like really written off Star Wars stuff. I'm still obviously a very big Star Wars fan and everything. So kind of like what I keep saying before, I just want these stories to be like hopeful and inspiring and just have a good story with a good character and good world and a good arc that they're going on, and not really have it be bogged down with divisiveness and all this stuff. We just want good Star Wars stories. That's all we need. But anyway, yeah, I'll just sign off for now and just say, yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. What movie or TV show are you looking forward to as far as Disney Star Wars? Be sure to leave it in the comments below. Be sure to give us a like and subscribe for more videos. May the Force be with you, and I'll see you next time.